Broadcasting live from the IRSMedic studios, it's Parental Advisory.
Our intro seems so low, but doesn't mean our energy level isn't super high.
It's fantastic.
It's so good today.
Because we're talking about taxes.
Taxes always get me going.
Super sexy taxes.
Gets me fired up. Yeah, I'm fired up today.
I am too.
Yeah.
This is a whole new world to me, getting fired up about taxes. I'm rather enjoying it.
Realize it. Yeah, once I know. It's like that day that I became, I think, somewhat radicalized a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, I think, where I started in law school, I basically just thought, taxes. Yeah, And then years of representing people before the IRS, then one day it happened where I said, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
This is friggin' crazy.
Yes.
Holy crap, this is crazy.
You have me reading books titled For Good and Evil, The Impact of Taxes on the Course of Civilization, and I like it. I like this book.
And that is something I am so proud of, that I was able to share that book. That's one of the books that changed so much of my thinking, and that all this stuff that we have, and we need to get a link on our website to that book, because that really should be mandatory reading for anybody. Anybody
who pays taxes.
Anybody who pays taxes or doesn't want to pay taxes. You got plenty of reason why. So where we're going to start off today with? We're going to start off today with talking about these tax proposals, right? We have these tax proposals. And, I think part of the whole, we're in the presidential season, because it's over a year away from the election for the next president of the United States. So, of course, we're thick within the season.
Yes.
And I scratch my head all the time because no one ever really talks about tax. But they come out with tax proposals. So some of them will come out with tax proposals. And it drives me nuts because people are like, well, we need to have this tax rate, we need to have this. And it's all meaningless. It's all meaningless because you can have a 100% tax rate, but depending on what your tax base is, it could be better. Or you could have a 1% tax, but depending on how you classify things, it could be worse. You have to look at the whole picture. And because people don't read a book like that, and our ignorance of the tax code and taxation and how they actually work is so vast, people can only think in very concepts. Flat tax, oh, I like the sounds of that. Or fair tax, I like the sounds of that. And so I think I would like to start with the fair tax, which is basically, I think that's the national sales tax.
Is that like Huckabee's proposal?
I think it is. It's somebody like that. I wasn't sure, but when I read it, I just shake my head. I can't even look at it because I can't even stomach it because it's so ridiculous. So because an income tax is a problem, because our national income tax is a problem, we're going to replace it with a national sales tax. So let's just poke a few holes in this. Okay. So let's talk about what's going to be exempted from that sales tax.
Oh, there's going to be things exempted?
Oh, well, don't you think there's lobbies out there? Just like there's certain lobbies that exempt certain things. Like life insurance proceeds are not taxable.
Okay.
And do you think Congress did that out of the goodness of their heart? Or do you think there might have been few levers there? So I'm going to say this. Any premium that you pay on life insurance, I'm going to say that's going to be an exempt.
All right.
I'm going to say milk is always exempt. That lobby there. You have your Iowa lobbies always first. This presidential season, you have to kiss ass to the Iowa lobby. So whatever's produced in Iowa is going to be something that's exempt. Because you have...
If cheese was exempt, I'd be okay with that.
So cheese is exempt.
Okay.
Dairy products to a certain degree. So really what the things that are not going to be exempt are those that are not that don't have political lobbies. Just sort of like it is now. The people without political lobbies are the people who bear the brunt of taxation. That people who make this amount, if you make over $250,000 to about, $10 million, you really don't have the political protection. So you pay most of the taxes. And that's actually what it is right now, that 1%, the evil 1% pays 90% of the taxes. Why is that? Because they don't have the political lobby. That's why. So the fair tax is stupid because the same exact dynamics are going to be in play, whether it's a sales tax or an income tax.
Yeah, true. I guess no matter what you name it. right?
Yeah. And also what you would just do is if I was somebody looking to sort of avoid this, well, I would start structuring my affairs because if things are taxed along the stream of commerce, I would set up my business so it became vertical. So there really were no transactions. It was all part of the same thing. And that's what happens. That's why it's a bad idea. And now you're going to still have the same people, or you're going to have the same. So what are you going to call them? Not the Internal Revenue Service. What are you going to call them? Something, right? Something. And they're going to come and they're going to go through people like, well, what did you buy this year? I need to take a look at what's in your house to see, make sure you didn't buy whatever thing. So it's the same invasive, same sort of compliance issue. It's just the wrong. It's not going to help out at all. And also here, this is the other thing that they're going to do with it, which is just so friggin' obvious that it makes me want to vomit. How obvious it is. They're going to say, well, you know what we like? We like this fair tax. We'll start with a lower rate on it. We'll start with the fair tax at say 6%.
Oh, okay. I can live with that. 6% is good.
Right. But you know what? Let's not. But we have an area of transition now. Okay, we totally want to get it to the fair tax. We're going to start the fair tax 6%. Okay, we don't want to shock the economy, so we're going to leave the federal income tax there as well. We're going to lower that. We're going to lower the income tax though by half, and we're going to have this fair tax of 6%. Now we'll have the highest federal income tax rate to be 19.35% or 3%. Okay, that's how they're going to sell it. Okay. And then guess what happens the next year? Oh, 7% here. Oh, 22% here. Oh, 10% here. Oh. So now you just have another taxation. You didn't do a damn thing except you doubled the taxation. You created this infrastructure for a national sales tax, and that's why that is a fantastically stupid idea.
Okay, now what about the alleged flat tax?
Oh, right. And I think, and I like this guy. I like this guy a lot, and I think this is Ted Cruz. He's the one, and a lot of them are the ones. Well, I want to have the income tax that you can fill out on the back of a. They always when they do it, they're on the back of a postcard, right? They're on the back of a postcard. You put down your income and you pay 15% of that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a pretty horrific idea because if we look back to 1913, the top marginal rate was 7%. So here you are, a so-called limited government Republican, more than double what the biggest progressive of 1913 wanted, right? So you have, it's 15%.
And even in this book, from what I've read, with the successful tax programs that can be flat taxed, the most that even the worst governments were willing to do is 10%.
Right.
They were like, no higher, 10% in your 11 and you're screwing the people. Like, let's...
10% is like sort of like, I think isn't that the tithing amount of, that's the amount that somehow has kind of been known to be sort of like, that's the amount people will pay without, and no one's really going to bother to avoid it. Of course you're always going to have like really true scumbags out there, but 10% is sort of like a fair amount that people are looking to do. And so even 15% is too much. And then I'm like, well, guess what? We already pay flat tax of 15%. Actually, it's 15.9%. And most people don't know it, but that is your Social Security and Medicare. You're paying, the employee pays half of it, and then the employer pays the other half. The employee never sees it, but don't you think you're paying for it? Because the employer would pay you more if he didn't have to pay that half of it. So you're like, wow, so we're already paying that. So where's this money? It's like it's not going to raise enough revenue. And now this is exactly how the monstrosity that we have today started. Someone's like, well, it's going to be a really simple income tax, a small rate, 15%, which is super, super high. And then it evolves. Next year, well, guess what's going to happen?
15.72.
And we also want to exempt corn sales or income from the raising of corn.
Yes.
And anything related with Iowa and New Hampshire. Really, that's the important thing. So as we all sort of, as everyone goes and kisses butt and the influences get made, guess what? We would end up with the exact same thing that we have today because that's exactly what we started with 100 years ago, and that's how we are today. So that's no good.
Right.
What do you think is good? Well,
I don't know. You would know better than I would.
Well, I have a story to tell you.
Oh, all right. Well, after this, I want to hear your story and your awesome tax proposal. We're calling it Anthony's Awesome Tax. Is that?
That is right.
Right,
That
right
is
after
right.
this on Parental Advisory. Coming up tomorrow on Parental Advisory, why do tax attorneys even exist? I'd say I'm worried about putting ourselves out of business with that one, but as long as the IRS exists, we'll be needed. Visit parentaladvisoryshow.com to listen live Tuesday at 11 a.m. or click on podcasts to listen to our shows. Be sure to visit our Facebook page to follow us and submit story ideas. And thanks to our sponsor, IRSMedic, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems. Visit IRSMedic.com for the latest news on the disaster that is the U.S. tax code. And we're back on Parental Advisory. We're talking about taxes today. First, we talked about fair tax and the alleged flat tax and why they are not really great ideas, and we'll sort of probably end up in the same boat that we are now. But you've got Anthony's awesome tax proposal.
Right, and it started from a story from an IRS revenue officer who came to my old office just about 10 years ago. And he was actually a bit of a right-winger. We hit it off a lot. I mean, he gave me a ton of pointers. He was really one of my mentors when I was getting into this. He came in and he was like a burly guy. He drove like a Jeep Cherokee.
No kidding.
And he was from Guilford. He's still around. I don't want to mention his name, but most people would know it. He worked in New Haven. He was just a great guy. And he helped me out a lot. And we would talk about various taxpayers, and a lot of things that were going on, a lot of things he knew were going on, taxpayers that I wasn't representing, but a lot of the craziness that went on. And then he would give me some inside scoops onto some of the administrative nonsense that went in on the IRS. And wow. I mean, just the stories that blew my mind about what actually went on. And again, something that, brought me to this path of where I'm pretty radical now. I am incredibly libertarian now, just because once you see what actually happens, it scares the crap out of you. It really does. Who decides somebody should go to prison and who shouldn't? Why should this person be hit with, millions of dollars and this person totally gets away with it? And it has nothing to do with justice. And I think, one of the problems that this country has is we have a presumption that justice exists, and it just doesn't. You got to get your own. That's it. Anyway, he and I, we would have, he would always come up by, we'd drink coffee, we would have our philosophical debates, and he was a student of the Constitution, as was I. I did very well in it in law school. Took classes in the Bill of Rights. Took one on the history of the Constitution in the Bill of Rights. Professor Stetton Krause, really great guy. The amount of reading in that class, I've never had as much reading. He would give us so many. We would read the proposed text of the Bill of Rights and various states' Bill of Rights, and then law review articles. I mean, we had a stack of this much to read, and every day we were expected to read about that much for class. And so you did some speed reading, not every word. You had to sort of, but it was a really fascinating class, and I learned so much in that class about how things really went down. Madison really didn't want to have the Bill of Rights. He thought the Bill of Rights was a stupid idea. Because he said, no, this is what's going to happen. This is exactly what's going to happen. The Constitution is supposed to be specific. These are the powers the federal government has, nothing more. Okay? As soon as you add a Bill of Rights, you're going to create a negative implication that if it's not stated in the Bill of Rights, that means the government can do it. So that's where you look at things, and it's like, holy crap, he's 100% right.
He was exactly right.
He was exactly right. And because he said, it's just basically one of these political moves of, there were farmers in Iowa, even though this was before Iowa, but those farmers in Iowa, he had to appease. And he said, well, they'll say, no, well, you can even put something in there, put some amendments in there that say the powers that the government has is only here, and their powers are reserved to the states. And there we have the 9th and 10th Amendment that are basically ignored, right? So that the powers the federal government has are only in that Constitution. Now, just because the courts have interpreted and made this the biggest mistake of negative implications possible, they do it all the time. They invent new rights and look at it. When they look at a Bill of Rights, they look at that text. As much as I disagree with the decision in Roe versus Wade, that penumbra of right to privacy, that's actually not bad reasoning. When you actually understand the Bill of Rights, you can actually look at it to say, well, you're not supposed to limit something. You're not supposed to limit the words. Those words are supposed to be expansive. When you look at privacy, when you look at the right to privacy, that means a broad right. Right? And how can we rectify the power a government has with the right to privacy? And that's sort of how this came around. Because we started talking about, well, he said, hey, well, Anthony, you tell me, where does the federal government get its power? I said, well, I know the federal government gets its power from the states. He said, very good. Where do the states get their power? I said, the states get their powers from its citizens. No, but, if you look at the constitutions, every state's going to have the thing, all powers vested in people, but they're all going to have similar language to that.
Right.
This is great. Now, I have a question. How does the federal government get the power to audit individual taxpayers? And I said, I don't know, the law?
Just does.
He goes, so follow me. He goes, Anthony, as an individual, let's just say I'm taking off my revenue officer badge. What right do I have to go through your financial affairs right now? I said, you have none. And my mother taught me that would be really rude to ask somebody how much money they make. He goes, you're absolutely right. I have no individual power to go through your affairs to see how much money you have or how much money you make, whatever your financial condition is. So how does the right that I don't possess individually, how can we make that a collective power of the government?
Holy crap.
And I said, you're right, you can't. There's no way to do it legally. That the government, the federal government, doesn't have the power to audit someone's personal financial affairs because that's not a right that individuals have with another individual. When you look at legitimate powers of the states, those are all rights that we have as a person. The right, if someone's terrorizing your neighborhood, you have the right individually to go kick the crap out of them or whatever. And you can bring that power together to say, you know what, it's a real pain in the butt for me to act as cop. Why don't we make, we'll put a police agency and then we'll make a defense and then we'll have national defense.
Okay.
Because these are all rights that, hey, these are rights that exist. When you look at business, we could all make a contract between each other, like, okay, here's our contract of how we're going to conduct our business. We're going to do this. We're going to use these names. We're going to talk about this law. Or you can just make a regulation to say, hey, guys, this is the off-the-shelf regulation. If you want to change it, you can. But this is just all right. And I believe we cut out a little bit there.
We're back.
We're back. We have to talk to our engineer about that. But I was talking about off-the-shelf regulations versus it's just better that we as people have the right to negotiate deals with each other, and that's something that we can hand off to the government to do.
Yep.
It's a legitimate use of it. The problem with the tax code, and that we have something that taxes people based on income, and the enforcement mechanism for that is that personal audit, where somebody is going through someone's personal affairs. Something that just putting something together doesn't create the right, but that's what we've sort of accepted. Now, the 16th Amendment was passed, and that was the amendment that allowed the state or the federal government to create that direct apportionment of income, the income tax that it sort of gave it. Well, shouldn't the Supreme Court read that 16th Amendment with that privacy, Bill of Rights sort of privacy understanding to say, fine, you can tax income all you want, but guess what? You're going to leave personal people alone because it's something the government doesn't have the power to do. You don't have the power to go and investigate people who are not, they're not suspected. There's no probable cause they committed a crime.
Wow.
And so there would have to be some sort of understanding. And basically, when you get down to it, there's no way to come up with a way that under a constitutional scheme where you could have people audit people on an individual basis. And that's where we left off. That's where I said, I'm like, God damn, if you're not right. And of course, he's working for the IRS and he's going around all the time. But he's like, yeah, what I'm doing is totally wrong. But he goes, it's the law and it's accepted, but it's structurally, it's completely unfair. And so I started thinking about that. I said, well, how would I go? You know, if I was going to try to do something, I do agree that I'm a libertarian. Does not mean I'm an anarchist. I believe there's limited government, that their government does provide things it can do better than other people. One of the things it does better than anything else is it repels. The only thing that can protect you from a invading state is a state. That if we were living in peace and harmony without a government, that's a really great thing to take over by a government that isn't so nice.
Yes.
Like, here's a cattle car for you,
And you.
Yeah. Oh, you have rights. Oh, good. Okay.
Can you get back in that cattle car, please?
Yeah, the rights are written out on the inside of the cattle car. Go read them. Here's a flashlight for you. So I think that's one thing that the federal government does really well. And in order to do that, you need to have revenue. And so, okay, revenue has to come from somewhere. So I started thinking of things a little bit differently. Now, one of the things I do when we are determining someone's ability to, if they owe an IRS debt, they owe lots of money back to the IRS, so we have to figure out what their financial situation is to see what they can afford to pay back. And we do that with a few different forms, a 433F or a 433A. 433A is the more advanced one, and it goes through, okay, this is how much money I'm making, and this is how much money my assets are. This is about how much I can afford to pay back. And I was thinking, well, you know what we should do is we should have a tax, but not really on income, but on persons, to say, and I just thought that $8,000. Every citizen in the country has a tax. If you're over 18 years old.
Okay, so over 18.
Over 18, you have a tax of $8,000 a year that you have to pay.
Wow.
Now, you would say the first problem, right? What's the first thing that somebody's going to have an issue with?
We're not going to generate enough revenue.
Okay, well, what's the other one, too? See, I could tell. Imagine you're 18.
Oh, what if I don't have a job?
Okay, there you go. You're looking at that $8,000, like, that's a bargain. Yeah, it's not
that's what I'm thinking.
That's perspective right there, right?
Yep.
A few years ago, our number one complaint would be like, I can't pay $8,000. Well, that's where we'd say, well, we have this off-the-shelf form. We have this form 433A. If you can't pay it, that's fine. We'll find the amount you can pay based on this formula of a form 433A. If you can't pay for the common defense, for the common things government needs, now guess what? Our right to trigger, there is a right to see what your ability to pay is. You're saying you can't pay what everyone else can pay. Okay, now we get to go look into your financial affairs to see what you have. And you're going to swear, I don't have this is what I make, and you're going to swear on a penalty of law that this is your amount. And then there would be a corresponding amount to say, hey, maybe you only could pay $6,000, maybe you pay $5,000, $100, or nothing, based on whatever it is.
Right.
So, okay, let's...
And then you're creating, I think, a bit more accountability than we have now, right? You lie, and there's going to be consequences.
Right, and I think there's going to be people who don't, there's going to be people who lie on that. But, I mean, you have to build that in. But for most people, I mean, we have clients who pay us over $8,000 a year for just their tax compliance, just to do their, you have foreign income, it gets up there. I mean, you have one form that could be $8,000. So for so many individuals, they would pay that $8,000 before, oh my God, there would be so many checks coming in, so happy. And I mean, and I'm saying for individual too, so the spouse too. So you're getting $16,000 from families happy to pay you that, just to be done, and there's nothing to do. And I think it's something where, well, what does that person get? I'm like, I think you give them a star. I think you give them a gold star. For tax year 2015, you get a gold star. And maybe you get to put that on your license plate or something.
And that's your credit rating, too,
right? And there's
right?
your credit rating. And then when you're applying for a loan or something like that, they don't want to know your bank, your past tax returns. They don't want to see that. How many stars in a row have you had? I have 6 years, 6 stars in a row. Like, all right, you seem like, hey, if you could pay them, you could probably pay us. Makes things a lot simpler. And now all this data isn't going all around. There aren't these tax returns with all this information where data is constantly breached. And then also, I mean, the IRS is, the evidence is out there. The IRS is somewhat politicized, that it goes after certain people. Information it shouldn't have, and it's using information, it's going against the people who are its enemies. I mean, it's gotten really, really bad. And so my calculations, I would guess, is that we would have about 100. We'd probably have 100 million taxpayers pay that $8,000 and be done with
you're
it.
Right.
And so, okay, and then you probably have the rest of them picking up and paying another 200 billion. So I'd say with this proposal, you'd raise $1 trillion in revenue, and the compliance worth is nothing. I mean, an incredibly tiny amount of money, $1 trillion, just like that. Now, the thing is we're a little bit short. The U.S. revenue is 3.5 trillion. But here's the thing. Most people don't realize 3.3 trillion of that comes from individuals.
Really?
Individuals are by far the biggest taxpayers. Maybe 3 trillion, because estates are in there as well.
Yep. That sounds backwards.
It sounds completely backwards. Why is it individuals are the biggest taxpayers? Now, I don't know if most people know this, but the U.S. has the highest corporate tax rate.
Right.
So
shouldn't they be bringing in 2.5 and we're bringing in 1? Like something?
Well, right. So individuals who are on the hook for everything that they do in their world, whereas corporations that have limited liability that exists solely at the state only pay a tiny bit of tax.
That's weird.
That's a little bit weird. So shouldn't we have it the other way around, where corporations pay more because they have limited liability that exists solely at the government's will?
Right.
And that's sort of where we need to get to, is where individuals are paying less. So now the only way to get corporations to pay more in taxes is, ironically, we have to lower the corporate income tax rate. It's at 35%. And this is the way most people don't understand this, but I have a lot of subscriptions to tax services, and I don't do corporate tax planning, but I read, I like to see what's going on. I'll watch, a webinar, and it is one of the most, I don't want to do it. It is depressing, and it is, the pressure is intense. If you're a tax manager for one of these large Fortune 500 companies, your compensation is going to be about $500,000 to $1 million, somewhere around there. Maybe as low as $300,000 to $1 million, and maybe some stock performance incentives. And this is your challenge. You're going to pay 4%. That corporation is going to pay 4% to the federal government. And if you don't, you're fired. You're out, and there's someone else who's going to sit there. So you have to keep this number so low. And so you have to come up with creative ways.
Yep.
Now, the good thing that what you do have in your arsenal is you do have, you're a Fortune 500 company, a large corporation. You do have multinationals, okay? So you could take advantage of all these things that individuals can't. The individual, a U.S. individual person, even just with one offshore company, can't do anything for tax planning. There's something called Subpart F that really kills a lot of things. There's really not a lot of things you can do. But once you're a multinational, because where's your corporate headquarters? Are you really a U.S. company, or maybe you're actually a U.K. company? So now you're treaty, so you're so you're flipping money all around, and then you'll give something to the U.S. government.
So a lot of the money from the corporations isn't existing in the United States; it's existing in other countries.
It was here at one point, but it's not right. But it's not funneled through there.
Right.
There's a lot. I mean, it's really ingenious what people have to come up with. And they do, and then the IRS goes around and changes that. Okay, well, we saw that, what they're doing there, so we're not going to let you do that. But then it's always constantly moving, and then the people at the IRS who come with those regulations, they leave, and now they're the tax managers making $500,000, $1 million.
Yep.
Then they go back to the IRS, and so there's this whole sort of rotating thing where it allows sort of like Congress gets the will of the people. Hey, we have a high corporate tax rate. Meanwhile, $200 billion is collected, a tiny percentage.
Ooh, that makes me feel sort of, I don't like that.
Right, and it's like you're being used. It's all political rhetoric and empty BS.
Right, and finding loopholes.
we're gonna get this and get this, and the thing is you can't close the loopholes. You can't close the loopholes. It's impossible, because what if somebody is really a UK company?
Yep.
What if they really are?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't do that. That's how wars are started. So the system is exactly how the system's going to be, and things will be shifting. But this is the way it's always going to work. When you have such a high corporate tax rate, money's going to leave the country, and it's going to be worth somebody's time.
Let's figure out how to fix this.
You got it.
We're going to continue Anthony's awesome tax plan right after this on Parental Advisory.
The IRS asked for feedback on its offshore voluntary disclosure program and streamlined procedures. Guess what? IRSMedic responded. On April 16th, members of the IRSMedic offshore team presented detailed improvements for the IRS to make to improve their offshore processes. From the perhaps picayune request to remove typos from their OVDP forms to the perhaps more significant advice on how the IRS can actually follow the law. So what are these improvements the IRS should make? Visit irsmedic.com to find out.
You guys really did have some awesome suggestions for the IRS.
Right, and it was actually October 16th, not April 16th.
Yes.
So it's only off by 6 months.
You were close.
And that was just a few days. That was on Friday.
Yep.
So close. Well, we're getting there. We're making improvements every day. I guess I spend a lot of my time thinking about other things.
It's true. So you were talking about the awesome tax idea you have.
Yep.
And right now we were talking about how corporations pay such a small percentage of these taxes, which I really had just assumed was the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Big corporations are paying a ton of money.
Mm-hmm. No, the evil 1%, they're paying basically 90%. The individuals who work their ass off, who take under all these student loans, who invest a significant amount of their own personal resources that have limited protection, they're the ones who are paying the bulk of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, they're the ones who are vilified. They are absolutely vilified. Does any one of these people who will benefit from their tax money ever say, hey, thank you so much? Wow, $1 million of tax money in 1 year, that's a lot of money. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
No.
And these corporations, just as a side thought, if they're LLCs, does that mean they're technically like a partner of the government?
Any limited liability company,
Mm-hmm.
any corporation limited liability partnership, they kind of are in a way, if you think about it, because there's no natural right. When we're doing our constitutional analysis on anything, we have to look at natural rights, and there is no natural right to having limited liability.
Mm-hmm.
The right is if you screw somebody over, you have a right to redress.
Mm-hmm.
But with a limited liability company, you can go, okay, we're going to go and strip mine this hill, and we're going to use pressure blasting, and we're going to build a dam that might not be safe. We're going to use these dangerous chemicals. Hey, look, we got our profits. Oops. Okay, and now we flood the town with poison on fire. We have our profits, and that limited liability protected you.
Mm-hmm.
And the government might kind of come afterwards to get its recompense, something. But you got that money. You took the money and ran. Mm-hmm. Limited liability is started. As far as I can tell, the British colonies wanted investments over. They wanted people to go, hey, could you go to North America and try to make us some money over there? Hey, and then the guy hey, look, man, that's a lot of risk, right? You mind limiting what I could be liable for? Sure.
Cool.
Just go and see what you can come back for us, and we'll limit it. And that's sort of how it is the government wants people to try things,
Mm-hmm.
right? It wants you to try. And if you succeed, through the government limiting what you can personally be exposed to,
Mm-hmm.
well then, hey man, that's only part of the deal, that you have to pay some tribute to the government that grants you that protection from the things that you do that could really harm people. Those are the social costs of having limited liability, and you should pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the whole sort of, I think, where things get completely backwards. Sometimes when you listen to people that are for pro individual rights, you hear them and they're like, man, you sound like you're more pro corporation. A corporation can really screw somebody over and leave them penniless.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing you can do. Well, it doesn't sound like you're into liberty all that much. So you have to understand that these limited liability companies and government are kind of in partnership. And if you are in partnership, well, now what? The government can go through. Hey, how much money you make?
Yep.
I need to know. It's my business because we're giving you a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think where this comes into where a smart policy comes into play is setting a tax rate where it's not worth it to fight it, where it's cheaper to pay it. That's where you want to come in at.
Yes, these big corporations, I can't imagine how much they're spending on finding people in the amount of time to find the loopholes.
I would say close to $1 trillion, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole, they're paying probably trillions of dollars to avoid, to avoid trillions of dollars of liability to get it down to that 200 billion. So it's worth it, and then send it elsewhere. When then it's going somewhere else, and then that capital isn't efficiently allocated because you're worried about how it's going to be taxed.
Yep.
So it's just crippling the economy, this huge, significant tax rate. Meanwhile, it's not serving. Everyone has it backwards. Everyone thinks everyone thinks as the individuals are sort of exploiting the system. Like,
No, it's really not.
So,
all right. So your awesome tax plan, we're starting with each individual in the United States, 18 and older, is going to pay $8,000. If they can't afford it, they can fill out a form and say, here's my income. What can I have? Can you help me figure out what I can afford?
Right.
All right. Now, what about companies?
Companies, we would want to set a corporate tax rate of 10%.
Okay.
Okay, because at that rate, it's not worth it. At any point, it's not worth it. It's no longer worth it to try to fight it. It's just cheaper to pay. And what would happen is, when you're looking at a $17 trillion economy in the U.S., now not all of that's through LLCs or it's not all through limited liability companies, but you got to say 14 trillion would be through that. So there's another. So from my 1 trillion I raised on the personal, we got 1.4 from businesses. So now we're at 2.4. But that also assumes that we don't have a static. That assumes that we have a static economy, but everything we know is dynamic. So the second you lower the 10% corporate tax rate and this kind of income where it's limited to $8,000 a year, the U.S. would be just a vacuum. I mean, you want to talk about the economy exploding.
Instead of sending money overseas to hide it, we'd keep it here.
We keep it here, and everyone's out in the open about it because at 10%, you're a fool to hide it. You're an absolute idiot to try to do something to lower it. It's just cheaper to pay it. You wish to pay your compliance was 10%. That's the biggest risk companies have. What's my is this having the best product, best service? No, the number one determiner of whether or not a business is going to be successful or not is can they get a handle on their compliance cost.
Wow.
And that's kind of sad. And so this rate, it's 10%, and you would just see the world explode. And then also the world would follow because they would say, oh, my God, look at what the U.S. is doing. And these corrupt government officials would say, well, you know what? We're corrupt. There's more money in it for us to do it this way than the way we're doing. They would rather take, a smaller percentage of a much bigger pie than that huge section of a pie that they're not quite getting.
And then you'd probably you'd cut the Internal Revenue Service employee task force in half at least.
Oh yeah.
You wouldn't. Need
a lot would move to. The individuals would be. You'd have random individuals auditing low income forms, but then a lot of people would be moving to corporate because that's where the work is.
Yeah.
Hey, just making sure your corporate number, your 10% is making sense. So that's where you would see a shift. And a lot of tax professionals, that would be the shift too, because when you're coming up with a system, it has to be workable. If you just said, hey, get rid of the IRS, well, that's not going to happen because there's people there with jobs. And if you're and the tax industry wants to exist, and you need to give them some sort of carrot to say, okay, this would work. And if you said, here's your carrot, there's plenty of work for you. It just would be a little bit different. You're not going to be so much on the individuals. There's going to be so much work to do in corporate taxation because they're going to be booming and they're going to need you. And then they're also going to need their internal controls or their internal audit controls. There's nothing like this hasn't happened in a while, but when we started, there was still somewhat of a boom going on in the economy. And people would have money. They start a business, construction business, for instance, and they, the biggest paycheck they have ever seen in their life was $1,000 a week. And then one day they're looking and there's $600,000 in an account, and it's their money. And they're like, wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But then it goes away. And one of the big ways it goes away is through employee theft.
Oh.
So that's one of the things that would be a huge growth industry. Right now, there's not enough to steal, except by the government. So you would need to have a whole bunch of compliance people and looking over and auditing to make sure the money is where it's supposed to be.
I think that sounds like a fantastic plan.
It's the awesome
An awesome plan.
plan.
But something you mentioned brings me to tomorrow's show, which is, why do tax attorneys even exist? I mean, if we had this flat tax program, you might be out of a job, my friend.
No, not the flat tax.
The awesome tax.
The awesome tax. I think I would be out of a job, or the job wouldn't be what it is. You know, that our job wouldn't be trying to get a federal agency to follow its own rules. You know, that's what we spend our time doing.
Exactly.
Our time wouldn't be spent trying to make a smart individual understand what the IRS is actually saying.
Yes.
And that's a big, significant part of our job.
Yes.
Our job, my job, would become more of, we would start doing compliance work for corporations to make sure employees weren't stealing money or shareholders were happy. I mean, that's where the growth would be.
Right.
And there would be no need for tax planners. There would be no need for estate planners. But there would be a huge need for people who know how systems work and how people work. And that's where I would would love to move IRSMedic into that field.
Eventually.
To remove the IRS from the medic.
After you become president.
That's probably, yeah.
Maybe 10, 12 years.
10, 12, yeah. So look, 10, 12 years, guys. This is what's going to be going on, so you'll notice some changes.
All right. Well, we will talk about, why do tax attorneys even exist, tomorrow at 11 a.m. Thank you for your awesome tax plan, Anthony. We'll be live again tomorrow at 11. Tune in to hear why we exist. Thanks for joining Parental Advisory, hosted by Anthony Parent, produced by Claudine Gindel, that's me, engineered by Chris Chen. For more podcasts, visit our website at parentaladvisoryshow.com and like us on Facebook to submit story ideas. We'd like to thank our sponsors, IRSMedic.com, the law offices of Parent, and Wynn, LLP, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems.